friends. Hello and welcome back. Hope everyone is having a lovely day. Now, I'm gonna be completely honest. I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna be transparent. I didn't even recognize that there wasn't daily content consistently. I mean, I know there was days sometimes. I know I've heard it's like, why ain't the kind of content today or today? It's like, EA take a day off. I remember sporadically noticing it, and I think this is important to note because it's like, as a content creator, as somebody who uploads about the content all the time, talks about HUD all the time, whatever, it's like I don't even pay attention that closely. And the reason I don't pay attention that closely is because there's so freaking much content. There's like 8 pages worth of content. And frankly, for me, I know the content that I care about. It's like, I'd like to know what the team of the week looks like. I'd like to know about the new events that come out. I mean, that's really it. Like, there isn't something that completely garners. I'm sorry, my apologies. My mic's going crazy here. There isn't something to me that completely garners a lot of interest besides that for me, unless there's, again, like a fantasy hockey thing. The HUD game days are a little bit more interesting lately, but it's like, for me, it's like I don't even pay that much attention. And I think that's important to know because I feel like a lot of casual players can say the same thing where it's like, hey, we enjoy the new content. There's a lot of stuff like it, but when there's so much content, you don't even, it starts to lose that novelty factor. And anyway, we'll go deeper into that here in a minute. I just thought that was interesting, and I wonder how many other people feel the exact same way when it comes to the content. Because I back in the day, I was always jumping on that content, especially like I said, the team of the week was something because it was there wasn't as much content being released, and it was rare and it was harder for players to get upgrades. So it was like, oh, the team of the week's out, what's coming out? Or even when it was player of the games, like it was difficult to get a player of the game. You would see, anywhere from 2 to 4 player of the games out there. Now they're called, live moments, but you'd see 2 to 4 of those released a day. And or milestones, you'd see 1 or 2 of those. It was rare, and it was difficult to see players get cards, and there was always criteria. So you could always watch for that stuff outside of HUT to see what the criteria was to kind of meet it. Now it's kind of like all over the place. It's how did this guy get it? How did that guy get it? Which, it's all right. I understand. I respect it because there's cool things that happen during the games. And EA is kind of like, let's highlight that. I like it. But, it kind of gave you a way to almost follow along, if you will, with some of your cards and some of your players when they did that. And then the Movember stuff. But anyway, I'm gonna be honest. I was really shocked when I seen a lot of game changers, tweeting at EA saying day 1 or day 2 of tweeting at EA Sports to revert back to daily hockey Ultimate Team content. And I'm gonna say this. We're all individual people. We all have our own opinions. I respect their opinions. If that, they're doing what I'm doing, right? They're doing what they think's best for the game. In their mind, they think, hey, daily content's the answer, and hopefully in their situation, that would work out. And that's their opinion. Personally, I think that's not the answer. I still think there's too much content. Honestly, I still do. Apparently, here's the thing I'll say is like, if daily content was the answer, why was the game dying out in November and December every year? This isn't a new thing. It's been a consistent thing. And I think a big part of that is, again, for multiple reasons, I look at it and say, hey, EA, I applaud you for not coming out with content every day. I really do. But I also think back to the days for multiple different things here. I started to make a list. I tweeted about it. It's like I started to make a list and to really think about things. And somebody mentioned this in a reply to another content creator's tweet. We're not going to name names. I'm not trying. Like I said, I try to call people out. They have their opinions. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I could be completely wrong. That's the beauty of an opinion. But somebody replied to it, and I was like, I didn't even think about it. Where they said, is that daily content really that important? Or, is it better now that instead of EA having a part of the team every single day, ciphering through every single game, every single stats, watching highlights, doing all this stuff, putting more time in the card art and everything else, is that more important than, say, maybe taking hours a day doing that and taking hours a day working on patches or tuners, fixing bugs in the game? It's like, which one's more important? Do you want the full game experience, or do you want because that is the thing with the NHL. This isn't FIFA. There is a limited amount of resources they do have. Now, EA's got all the money in the world. We know that. But as a business, you're going to limit your resources to the smaller games, and they're just not going to give as much money. That's just what EA Sports has to do. EA Sports NHL has to deal with. That's that's out of their control. It's out of our control. That's above them. We just have to work under that budget. So we can't be upset that they won't allocate more money. They're working the best with what they can. They've been doing a great job. they've been doing a really good job trying to come out with patches, come out with, figuring things out in that department. It's like, that's the thing. Would you rather them have work on the actual gameplay, work on modes and everything actually for next year? Or is it more important that they release 25 new hot cards every single day and go through every single little thing? I think that's important to consider. The things that I was going to, we go back to like the novelty factor. I'm really trying to articulate this one. I don't think it's going to make sense though. I'm just thinking like, it's so important to get daily content. And you watch even with like the NHL now, or, I guess basketball, you can say the same thing. It's like, would you put an NHL game on national television? So NBC, what is it? TSN? What are they doing? What do they do in Canada? NBC here. If it's on NBC, not NBC Sports Network, but NBC, the national televised channel. If you put a game on that channel every single day, is that going to get the same viewership and interest as doing it 2 or 3 times a week? But doing it with only good teams or only popular teams. And that, that's or playoff teams. It's like, does anybody actually want to tune in and watch Blue Jackets versus, Ducks or something, or Blue Jackets versus Sharks on NBC just because it's the only game that day, but we have to release that one day. We have to release content every day. So we're going to throw it out there. We're going to throw it at you guys just to do it. Sometimes I think about that with like cards and stuff where it's giving people cards just to give cards that have content out there. It can saturate things a little bit, so you're just not as interested, opposed to almost building up or leading up to the big games that are highlighted where everybody can watch. And everybody, I'm gonna be honest, it's still not adding up in my head completely. I'm trying to think of the proper comparison there, but there's a reason like networks and stuff do that, where they're like, we're only going to highlight the playoff games, the big games that everybody has interest in, because quality is very often more important than quantity. Just because you put out 3 primetime games on national television doesn't mean everybody's going to tune into it. Just because you come out with daily hut content and come out with 35 hut moment players, 13 milestone players, and 12 players, doesn't mean people are going to tune into the game and play just because you release that content. Again, I try to think, what I've been looking at is I think of it this way when it comes to the hut content, and you say this: if there's I always think of the past. Now, obviously I was younger and the interest is different. I played the game. I definitely played it a lot more. I used to have a problem. I was like a 10 to 12 hour a day player. Back in the day, it was like, if you released 5 new cards in a day and only a couple of players had X or Y, it's like, okay, now I really want to have this. There's a novelty factor. There's a rarity factor. The comparison I try to give is almost like card collecting in real life. Like, it's, if every single player had, a million versions of this card and this card and this card, it's like all of a sudden you're not as intrigued, as excited to pull that version of that card as opposed to like a rookie card or something. And that's kind of like that with HUD. It's like, well, oh, that's great. You pulled an 89 overall HUD moments. Well, he's also got this 89 and this 89. And there's also 50 other players with that 89. It's like, all of a sudden back in the day, it was really cool to pull a player that had a 95 speed, 95 shot, 95 wrist shot power. But it's like, oh, that's one of 40 other players that have that now. So even when you do release the new content, it's like, the drive, the motive to get that card, it's not as much there because there's so many other options. The whole point of Ultimate Team is building that Ultimate Team that's difficult to, put together and accomplish. And again, I say, back in the day, it was like, I feel like such an old person saying this, but it's like back in the day, instead of having, you come out with the Hut Moments cards and there's 5 players with an 89-90, it's like, okay, now I have a choice of 1 of 5. It's like, I'm not as interested because there's already 50 other ones to choose from. But if you come out with, say, 189 a week or 289s a week, it's like all of a sudden I got to have that. And it's very difficult to get because there's just not as many options. So you're forced to kind of play the game more. You're supposed to grind the game more. And you're more interested in the new content because there's such fewer options. Right now, it's like you get onto this game and say, oh, there's content out. I already know EA. I already know that, there's a couple players that are 92. Everybody else is kind of below them. And I just don't care as much. And I think, another big thing is the master sets. Kind of again, we talk about the quality, not the quantity. We're releasing master sets. You have to put all these work into doing them. And they're 4 overall points lower than the best card in the game right now. Back, before your master sets were the best players. There's a reason you want to grind and put hundreds of thousands of coins in them, grind it out. And right now they're borderline irrelevant. Like there's a couple cards that are really good still that are, good stats and stuff. But at the end of the day, again, you're grinding for a card that has 4 overall points lower than the best card in the game, which makes, again, it's just not as worth it. And I just look at other games. Well, it was MLB The Show was just voted best sports game of the year, right? They ain't releasing 25 cards a day. I think they do 2 to 3 times a week. They'll release new content. Now there'll be other days they'll release like a certain pack or a certain event, but it's a rotation where it's not every single day where they're releasing 25, 30 cards. And again, there's good reason for that. Like the way they did it was, here's a collection. They went by seasons. They rotated players out after a couple of seasons. That was a great idea they did there. But they went by seasons to where it was like, hey, every 6 weeks, here's the 3 best players of that season. You want them, you have to grind. There's one path to them. We're not going to release a bunch of other 99 overalls or a bunch of cards of the same overalls in that 6 weeks. Here's the money. We might release, 2 a week at most and go on from there. And the thing with baseball, it's so much different because the stats are so much different still, to where, they still rotate a lot. I mean, we see a little bit in NHL where it's like, you look at those players and say, okay, maybe 1 card a week is something super desirable. And everything else is just kind of different. Like, in NHL's case, you have 1 card a week that's got a great shot, great face-offs, great speed. And the others might be a little bit slower, might be a little bit bigger, might not have the best shot. So it's like they're not as desirable. So you do something like that once a week, and all of a sudden people can keep up with a little bit better. And then you have the super cards, if you will, that, every 6 weeks are the best of the best that to go after. But right now it feels like, you get into that situation where every day you can almost have the best of the week. Braden Point would be used as a great example. I mean, he's one of the better cards in the game, and he's so freaking cheap. You don't hear him talked about because there's just so many cards that get nice stats as the cards go up as a whole. But I almost think of like there's never been a year I was like Gretzky and Lemieux. Really, I had zero interest in getting them because there's how many other people with the same stats and same card already. Now, don't get me wrong, they're great players and they're fantastic players, and that's kind of the we go back to the novelty factor or the quality factor, where it's you kind of want to have that clear sight of like, oh, these guys have been the best of the best this year. That's why they have the best of the best overall, compared to like, oh, we're giving this guy nothing against Jack Hughes. I don't know how he's been doing lately, actually. But, somebody like Jack Hughes. Jack Hughes is considered the best player in the game right now, based on his overall. And Kucherov deservedly so. But you look at that and say, does that exemplify this year's game? Or are we just seeing a bunch of, daily content being released and he was a beneficiary of that kind of situation? Nonetheless, it's a big opinion thing for everybody. I know. I've always been that way. The rarity factor. And I feel like that's a thing in general for people. It's like the gold guns or something. If it was easy for everybody to get, would it be as interesting? Just like the team of the years, if every player had a team of the year, and you would see it, they'd be like 50K. If it was easy for everybody to get them and there's so much content thrown at you, would the interest be the same as if there was that rarity factor there? Personal thoughts. Love you all. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.